The small-town diner on the corner of Maple Street had seen countless faces over the years. Truck drivers stopping for a quick coffee, families coming in on Sundays after church, and teenagers lingering over milkshakes late into the night. But to Kinza, the young waitress who worked there 6 days a week, the diner was more than just a workplace. It was her survival. Kinza was only 21, but life had already carved responsibility into her face. Her mother had passed away when she was just 16, and her father, a kind but fragile man, had been bedridden for years. She was the sole breadwinner of the family. Each morning she would rise before dawn, prepare her father's breakfast, leave some medicine by his bedside, and hurry across town to start her shift at Eddie's diner. She wasn't glamorous. Her blue uniform had faded after hundreds of washes, and her shoes were scuffed from walking back and forth across the black and white tiled floor. But Kinza's eyes carried something more valuable than beauty: kindness. Even when she was exhausted, she smiled at customers, asked about their day, and remembered their usual orders. It was on a gray autumn afternoon when she first saw him. The doorbell chimed, and a wheelchair rolled inside, pushed by no one but guided steadily by the man himself. He was in his early 30s, his beard trimmed neatly, his shoulders strong despite his legs being still. His green jacket looked worn, and his eyes carried a weight Kinza couldn't quite define. He paused by the door, scanning the booths as if he wasn't sure he belonged there. Kinza instinctively walked over. "Hello, sir. Would you like a booth or a table?" she asked warmly. The man gave a small smile. "A booth, please. By the window." She guided him to a corner booth, helped move the chair so his wheelchair fit, and handed him a menu. "My name's Kinza. Let me know if you need anything." He looked up at her with quiet gratitude. "Thank you. I'm Siam." That first afternoon, Siam ordered only a bowl of soup and a glass of water. Kinza noticed the way he ate slowly, savoring each spoonful, as if the soup was more than food. It was warmth, comfort, and memory. Unlike other customers, he didn't hurry. He stayed for almost an hour, watching people come and go, gazing out the window at the drifting leaves. When Kinza returned with the check, she hesitated. The bill was only $3.50. She wondered if he could afford even that. Something in his eyes told her he wasn't just hungry for food, he was hungry for kindness. Quietly, she slipped the check into her apron pocket and said, "It's on the house today. Welcome to Eddie's." Siam blinked, startled. I can't accept charity." "It's not charity," Kinza insisted gently. "Consider it a welcome gift. Maybe next time you'll let me bring you dessert." For the first time, his serious face softened into a real smile. "Then I'll have to come back." Siam did come back. The very next day. This time, Kinza noticed the way he rolled in with more confidence. He chose the same booth, and when she approached, he said, "Soup again. And maybe some bread today, if that's all right." She laughed. "You don't have to ask permission to order bread." Day after day, Siam returned. Sometimes he ordered more, an omelet, a slice of pie, but most days he kept it simple. Soup, bread, water. It became a rhythm, a quiet ritual. The other waitresses joked about Kinza's special customer, but she didn't mind. There was something about Siam that felt different. She noticed things. The way he always brought a notebook and scribbled between bites. The way he sometimes looked at families with an expression that was half longing, half sorrow. The way he seemed endlessly polite, never raising his voice, never demanding more than what was given. One rainy evening, as the diner's windows fogged up with steam, Kinza brought him his usual order and asked, "What do you write in that notebook all the time?" Siam hesitated, then tilted it so she could glimpse. Inside were sketches, detailed, almost architectural drawings of buildings, bridges, parks. Next to them were paragraphs of notes, lists of numbers, ideas. "You draw?" she asked, surprised. "Design," he corrected softly. "It used to be my work. Maybe it still is, though I haven't touched a real project in years." "Why not?" His eyes flickered to his legs. "Life changes." Kinza felt a pang of sympathy, but she didn't press. Instead, she said, "Well, Your soup is getting cold. And for what it's worth, those drawings look amazing. Weeks turned into months. For Kinza, the diner was still exhausting, her father still needed care, and money was always short. But somehow, Siam's presence made the days brighter. He listened to her stories, about her father's stubbornness, about her silly neighbor's cat, about her dreams of someday studying nursing. He never judged, never dismissed her. For Siam, the diner became a haven. He had been drifting in shadows, carrying secrets no one knew. But Kinza's kindness, so casual, so genuine, was a light. She treated him not as a man in a wheelchair, not as a burden, but simply as a person. And slowly, a quiet friendship bloomed. One night, as Kinza wiped down tables after closing, Siam lingered by the window. The diner was empty except for them. You know, he said thoughtfully, most people see a man like me and think of limits. You don't. She set down the rag, surprised. Why would I? Everyone has struggles. You happen to have yours visible. I have mine too, just hidden. Siam looked at her for a long time, as if memorizing her face. Then he whispered, maybe that's why I come here. Because you see me, not my chair. Kinza didn't know what to say. Her cheeks warmed, but she only smiled and replied softly, then keep coming back. And he did. Neither of them knew then how deeply their lives were about to intertwine. Neither knew that behind Siam's quiet demeanor was a secret so vast it would shake Kinza's world forever. For now, it was just a poor waitress and a disabled man, sharing soup, bread, and something far more nourishing: hope. The days blurred into each other, stitched together by the steady rhythm of life at Eddie's diner. Morning rushes, clattering dishes, the hiss of the coffee machine. Kinza had grown so used to the chaos that she barely noticed it anymore. But one part of her day always stood out: the moment Siam rolled through the door. It was never at the same time. Some days he came early, just after the breakfast crowd left, when sunlight streamed through the windows and made the dust in the air sparkle like tiny stars. Other days he appeared in the late afternoon, as if waiting until the diner was quiet enough to let him slip in without attracting much notice. But no matter the hour, his presence was predictable in another way. The moment Kinza saw him, she felt the weight of her tired shoulders lighten. She never admitted it to anyone, not even herself at first, but she began to look forward to those moments more than anything else. One Tuesday afternoon, Kinza brought Siam his usual soup and bread. But instead of pulling out his notebook, he sat with his hands folded on the table. His eyes seemed distant. You okay? She asked, setting down the bowl. He gave a half-smile. I'm fine. Just wondering how people keep going, even when everything feels impossible. Kinza sat across from him for a moment, breaking the diner's unspoken rule of servers not sitting with customers. Because they have to. And because sometimes there's someone who makes it feel less impossible. Their eyes met, and for a second the noisy diner around them seemed to fade. Then Siam chuckled lightly. You always know what to say. I don't, Kinza said honestly. But I know what it feels like to want someone to care. So I try to be that person. Their conversations grew longer, stretching from casual chatter about weather or favorite foods to deep talks about dreams, regrets, and the mysteries of life. Siam told her about books he loved, classics and philosophy, and Kinza, though she hadn't read many, listened eagerly. She shared stories of her father, of how hard it was to watch someone strong become weak, and Siam listened without pity, only with respect. Sometimes, he surprised her with small gestures. Once, he brought her a tiny packet of flower seeds. You said you wish you had a garden, he explained. Maybe you can grow these in a little pot by your window. It was the simplest gift she had ever received, but it made her eyes shine. Other times he tested her in subtle ways. He would ask questions like, if someone lost everything, do you think they could start over? Or, would you befriend someone if you knew they weren't who they seemed? Kinza always answered with honesty, though she didn't always understand why he asked. You can't judge people by what they've lost, she said once, pouring him more water. You can only judge them by what they do with what's left. Her words lingered with him long after she walked away. But life wasn't suddenly easy for Kinza. Her father's health worsened as winter crept in. Medical bills piled up. The landlord threatened eviction more than once. There were nights she cried quietly in her small bedroom, exhausted and afraid, clutching the little packet of flower seeds Siam had given her because it reminded her that hope, like flowers, could bloom even in harsh soil. One evening, after closing, Siam insisted on staying behind to help. "You've been on your feet all day. Let me at least wipe the tables," he said, grabbing a rag.
Kinza laughed.
"You can't even reach half the tables from there."
True.
"But I can reach the ones near me. Don't rob me of the chance to feel useful." They ended up working together, laughing at the sight of Siam maneuvering his wheelchair between booths, trying to balance a spray bottle and rag in his lap. For a man who carried so much heaviness in his eyes, his laughter that night was rich and genuine. When they finished, they sat by the window. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft flakes spiraling down beneath the street lamps. "It's beautiful," Kinza whispered. Siam glanced at her, his gaze lingering on her profile as she watched the snow. "It is," he agreed, though he wasn't looking outside at all. As weeks passed, whispers began among the other waitresses. "Kinza's got herself a mystery man," one teased. Another said, "He's handsome, even if he's in a chair. Maybe you'll end up marrying him." Kinza laughed it off, but when she was alone, the thought made her heart race. She scolded herself for even entertaining it. She was poor, struggling, with nothing to offer but a kind heart. What could she possibly give a man like Siam? And besides, he seemed to carry a burden she didn't fully understand. But feelings are stubborn things. They bloom quietly, unnoticed, until one day they're undeniable. And with every bowl of soup, every shared story, every stolen moment of laughter, Kinza felt something new stirring inside her, something terrifying and wonderful all at once. One snowy night, after she finished her shift, Kinza found Siam waiting outside the diner. "Do you need a ride home?" he asked. She shook her head. "I'll walk. It's not far." "You shouldn't walk alone in the snow this late." She smiled gently. "I've done it 100 times. Don't worry." But worry was etched on his face. "If I could, I'd walk you home myself." Those words hit her harder than she expected. For the first time, she saw past his calm exterior into the ache beneath. He didn't just want to protect her, he wanted to be more than his chair allowed him to be. Kinza's throat tightened. She crouched beside him, meeting his eyes. "Siam, you already do more for me than you know. You make me feel seen. That matters more than walking." Silence stretched between them, heavy but tender. Finally, Siam whispered, "You don't know who I really am." "Then tell me," she said softly. His lips parted, but then he closed them again, shaking his head. "Not yet." And with that, the moment passed. But Kinza didn't need his secrets to know one truth. She cared for him, more than she should, more than she dared admit. As the snow deepened outside and life's struggles pressed harder, their bond only grew stronger. Yet beneath it all, an unspoken question lingered. What was Siam hiding? Why did he always stop short when speaking about his past? Kinza didn't know the answers. But she knew this. Whatever Siam's secrets were, she would rather face them with him than live without him. And so, the poor waitress and the disabled man continued their daily ritual, unaware that the fragile threads of their bond were weaving into something far greater, something that would soon unravel the truth in ways neither of them could have imagined. The new year arrived, cold and unforgiving. Snow covered the streets, the diner's windows frosted at the corners, and the coffee machine hissed almost nonstop as people poured in to escape the chill. For Kinza, nothing had changed in her routine: long shifts, aching feet, nights spent worrying over bills. But there was one thing that kept her heart warm through the bitter winter: Siam. He never failed to come. Sometimes his hands were red from the cold, sometimes his jacket looked thinner than it should against the freezing winds, but still he came. And each time, Kinza greeted him with the same warmth, as though he were the most important customer in the world. But beneath his steady presence, there was something different now. A heaviness, a hesitation. He seemed on the verge of saying something important, only to stop, swallow his words, and change the subject. One evening, Kinza decided she couldn't ignore it any longer. She slid into the booth across from him after serving his soup. "You've been quiet lately," she said gently. "Is something wrong?" Symes stirred the soup with his spoon, avoiding her gaze. "You ever feel like you're living half a life? Like you're hiding so much that people don't even know who you are?" Kinza blinked, caught off guard. "Yes," she admitted. "All the time. People see me as just a waitress. They don't know my father's sick, or that I dream of becoming a nurse. They don't know how scared I am most nights about money. They only see the uniform and the smile." Symes' eyes flicked up, studying her. "And if you found out someone you trusted was very different from who you thought, would you feel betrayed?"
Kinza thought about it.
"I think it depends. If they lied to hurt me, yes. But if they were just afraid, I'd want to understand why." Something in her answer softened him. For a moment, he looked as though he might finally confess. But instead, he only said, "You're kinder than most people deserve." Over the next weeks, the tension grew. Their bond was stronger than ever, yet Symes' mystery cast a shadow. Kinza didn't push. She had learned that trust had to be given, not demanded. Still, curiosity gnawed at her. One Saturday night, the diner was unusually quiet. A snowstorm had kept most customers at home. Kinza and Symes were the only ones there, and the owner, Eddie, had retreated to the back office. "You ever think about the future?" Symes asked suddenly. "All the time," Kinza replied, leaning against the booth. "Though mine feels blurry. I just want enough money to pay for my father's care. Maybe go back to school someday. Beyond that, I don't let myself dream too much. Dreams are expensive. And if money were the problem?" She laughed softly. "If money were the problem, I'd study nursing, buy a small house with a garden, and..." She hesitated, embarrassed. "And," he pressed. "And maybe I'd marry someone who makes me laugh even when life is hard." Symes' lips curved into a faint smile. "That doesn't sound so impossible." "It does when you're poor," Kinza replied quietly. He grew serious again. "What if one day I told you I wasn't who you thought I was? That I had more than you could imagine?" Kinza tilted her head, searching his face. "I'd say you don't need to impress me with riches or stories. I like you for who you are right now, sitting in this booth with soup and bread. That's enough." Her sincerity hit him like a thunderbolt. His throat tightened, his hands clenched, and for a moment, he had to look away to hide the emotion in his eyes. That night, when Kinza walked home, she found herself replaying his words. "More than you could imagine." She didn't know why, but they echoed in her mind like a puzzle piece she couldn't place. The following week, an incident shook everything. A group of rowdy young men came into the diner late at night. They were loud, arrogant, and dismissive toward Kinza, making jokes at her expense. When she brought their order, one of them deliberately knocked a glass of water across the table, soaking her uniform. "Oops," he sneered. "Guess the help should be more careful." Kinza flushed, humiliated. Before she could retreat, a voice cut through the laughter. "That's enough." It was Symes. He had wheeled his chair closer, his eyes blazing with an authority Kinza had never seen before. The young men laughed at him. "What are you going to do, roll over us?" But something in Symes' tone silenced them. "You don't disrespect people who work harder in one day than you do in a year. Apologize." The sharpness of his voice, the command in his gaze, it unsettled them. Grumbling, the men tossed some money on the table and left without another word. Kinza stood frozen, staring at Symes. For a moment, he didn't look like the quiet, struggling man she had come to know. He looked like someone powerful, someone used to being obeyed. "Who are you?" she whispered. He exhaled slowly, the fire in his eyes dimming back into weariness. "Someone I'm not ready to explain yet." That night, Kinza couldn't sleep. Pieces of the puzzle clicked together in her mind. His architectural sketches, his way of speaking, the quiet authority he carried, the way he sometimes seemed burdened by a double life. Whoever Symes was, he wasn't just an ordinary man in a wheelchair. But she also knew this. No matter what secrets he carried, he was still the man who shared soup with her, who gave her flower seeds, who listened when no one else did. And that man was worth standing by. A few days later, Siam surprised her. "Come with me," he said after dinner at the diner. "To where?" "Just trust me." Against her better judgment, Kinza agreed. He guided his chair to a waiting car outside, sleek, black, and expensive-looking. Kinza blinked in shock. She had never seen him with a car before, let alone one like this. A driver stepped out and held the door for them. Kinza froze. "Siam, what is this?" He looked at her, his expression conflicted, almost pained. "Part of the truth I've been hiding." Her heart pounded. She slid into the car beside him, questions swirling in her mind. For the first time since they'd met, Kinza realized the man she had been feeding every day might not be poor at all. And she had no idea what revelation awaited her. The sleek car glided silently through the city streets, headlights reflecting off the snowbanks. Kinza sat in the back seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her heart thundering. The world outside blurred past, but all she could think about was the man beside her. Siam was quiet, his expression unreadable, as if he were preparing for a storm. At last, the car turned into a gated driveway. Iron gates swung open, revealing a vast mansion set against the night sky. Its windows glowed with golden light, the snow-covered gardens stretching in every direction like something out of a dream.
Kinza gasped.
This can't be yours." Siam turned to her, his voice low but steady. "It is." She shook her head, struggling to breathe. "You've been eating soup and bread every day, sitting in a corner booth, like you had nothing. Why didn't you?" "Because I needed to know," he interrupted gently. "I needed to know if someone could care for me without knowing about this." He gestured toward the sprawling estate outside the window. "All my life, people have seen only money. They see power, wealth, opportunity. But you saw a man in a wheelchair and treated him with kindness when you had nothing to gain." Kinza stared at him, stunned into silence. The car stopped at the front entrance, where staff in uniforms waited respectfully. One man opened the door, bowing slightly. "Welcome home, sir." Siam wheeled himself out, then turned to Kinza. "I didn't want to tell you this way, but you deserve the truth. I am Siam Ahmed, owner of several companies, architect of projects you've probably seen on the news. And yes, I'm a billionaire." The words hung in the air, heavy and surreal. Kinza's mind spun. She thought of the sketches in his notebook, the authority in his voice that night with the rowdy men, the sleek car. It all made sense now, but it also made her feel small, out of place. She was just a poor waitress with an ailing father. What could a man like him want with her? As if sensing her thoughts, Siam said softly, "Kinza, I don't need someone impressed by my wealth. I need someone who sees me. And you already have." Tears pricked her eyes. "But I have nothing to give you." He shook his head firmly. "You gave me more than anyone else ever has. You gave me kindness when I felt invisible. You gave me hope when I thought my life was over. You fed me when you had barely enough for yourself. Kinza, you gave me everything." The days that followed were a whirlwind. Siam introduced her slowly to his world. The mansion, the companies, the endless responsibilities that came with his wealth. Kinza was overwhelmed, yet everywhere she went, people treated her with respect. Not because of who she was, but because of who Siam was. And still, he never let her forget the beginning. One evening, he asked the chef to prepare nothing but soup and bread. When Kinza laughed at the simplicity, he said, "Because no matter what we have, this is what brought us together. And I never want to forget it." Her heart ached with love. But not everything was easy. There were whispers among people in Siam's world, questions about who Kinza was, why he chose a waitress instead of someone from wealth and prestige. Kinza felt the sting of judgment, but Siam stood by her side unwaveringly. "Let them talk," he told her one night as they walked through the mansion's vast garden. "They don't know that your kindness is worth more than all their fortunes combined." She smiled through tears. "You make it sound like I saved you." You did, he whispered. Months later, as spring warmed the air, Siam made his move. He brought Kinza back to the diner where they first met. The booths were the same, the floor still checkered, the air filled with the smell of coffee and pie. But this time, the diner was empty, rented out entirely for them. Kinza looked around in amazement. Why is it so quiet? Siam wheeled himself to the same booth by the window and motioned for her to sit across from him. On the table was a small bowl of soup and a piece of bread. Her eyes widened. You remembered. I could never forget, he said softly. Then, from his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Kinza's breath caught. Kinza, he began, his voice trembling slightly, you fed me when I had no strength. You listened to me when I had no voice. You gave me love when I thought I had nothing left to give. You didn't fall in love with a billionaire. You fell in love with a man. And I will spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of you. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down her face. She covered her mouth, nodding furiously. Yes, Siam. 1,000 times yes. He opened the box, revealing a delicate diamond ring that sparkled like the first snow. With shaking hands, Kinza let him slip it onto her finger. The diner, the place where it all began, became the place where their forever started. Their wedding was small but beautiful, held in the garden of Siam's estate. White flowers lined the aisle, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of spring blossoms. Kinza walked toward him in a simple gown, her heart pounding with joy. When they exchanged vows, Siam's voice broke. I once thought I had everything, but I was empty. Then you came and gave me what money could never buy: love, kindness, and a reason to live. I promise to cherish you every day of my life. Kinza, tears in her eyes, whispered back, I don't care about your riches, Siam. I only care about you. The man who sat in my booth, ate soup, and made me believe in hope again. I promise to stand by you in every season of life. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, applause filled the garden. For once, Siam didn't feel like a billionaire or a man in a wheelchair. He felt simply like a husband, loved for who he truly was. And so, the poor waitress and the disabled man, who had once seemed so ordinary, proved that love wasn't built on wealth or status, but on kindness, trust, and the courage to see someone's heart beyond their circumstances. Every day afterward, no matter how busy or grand their lives became, Siam and Kinza made a promise. At least once a week, they would sit together with nothing more than soup and bread to remember where it all began. Because sometimes, the simplest meals make the richest memories.